Hey, everybody, welcome back to Pro AV today. I am your host, as always, Ben Thomas. Today's conversation centers around the world of streaming and broadcasting, but more specifically, streaming and broadcasting the world of sports. Now, it's been interesting to see over the last few years an increase in people wanting to stream over terrestrial television. So I wanted to have that conversation today, but skewed a little bit more towards the infrastructure side of things, some of the implications that pop up as people continue to pivot more towards streaming sports. And I brought on somebody who's been on the show before to talk about that. And of course, I had to bring on my friend Jed Corenthal from Phenix Real-Time Streaming. Jed, thanks so much for coming back on the show today.
Ben, it is a pleasure and good to see you.
Well, look, since the last time we spoke, things have changed pretty dramatically. And I feel like that was like a year and a half ago at most. But, you look at the previous NFL season, you look at things like, Peacock having the largest streamed sporting event of all time now in a playoff game. It's very obvious that there is a shift happening to where folks are just wanting to consume sports the way that they're consuming a lot of other things, and that is through streaming. And I want to ask, especially from a broadcaster's perspective, give us just a quick kind of overview of some of the changes that have happened, not only from a user preference standpoint, but maybe some of the infrastructure requirements that are actually need to be put into place before people can actually implement something like this effectively.
Sure. Well, I guess one of the things to start out with is, although there's been a lot of change, a lot of things remain the same, which is unfortunate, frankly, because the technology that most of the broadcasters employ, which is a traditional sort of HLS workflow, hasn't really improved at all. So what you're going to see and what you're seeing in the Super Bowl and pretty much everything everywhere else are delays in the 30, 40, 50, 60-second range, from the field of play to a user's device. And, that is not changing and hasn't changed and won't change until they actually change their technology. So, one of the things that we've been sort of screaming from the rooftops is, wait a second, what you've been experiencing doesn't have to happen anymore. You don't have to have 30-second delays or 60-second delays. You don't have to be out of sync from your neighbor or your friends. So when you get a tweet or a text or a notification, that says, hey, did you see that great play? You haven't seen it yet. Those things don't have to happen anymore. So we're trying to, get out there and scream and yell and beat people up and do whatever it takes to get some things to change. But, look, I mean, one of the things that we're starting to see is, to your point initially in your opening, is the shift to more streaming. Peacock streamed a game exclusively. Amazon is going to stream an exclusive playoff game next year. So that is only going to increase. And the amount of people that are moving to more and more streaming services to watch and consume their content not only won't slow down, but will only increase. So in theory, it makes the technology that they use that much more important, because the experience that they're going to have needs to improve. It needs to be better. So hopefully, that will be a benefit to us and in the long run them, because it will be a better user experience.
Well, Jed, I want to ask kind of in that same vein, one of the things that we've seen recently is quite a bit of conglomeration, right, with folks like Fox and Warner Brothers, and I think it was ESPN that announced that they were going to partner together to start streaming all these different games. It sounds cool in principle and in theory, right? But there's a lot of back end things that have to happen there, not only just from a UI and UX standpoint and from a delivery perspective, but actually making that stream happen and delivering it, right? As you see a lot of these different conglomerations happen, what are some of the common challenges that folks are running into from just implementing something that works from a streaming standpoint?
Yeah, no question. I think M&A is only going to increase as well. And you're right. It's Fox, Warner Brothers, Discovery, and ESPN, Disney. So, that new sort of bundle, if you will, isn't going to change a whole lot, because it's just taking the three pieces that exist and just kind of merging them together. The challenges that they're going to have are in the financial side. What is it going to cost the user to subscribe to a bundle like that, 40, 50, $60 have been thrown around. How is the money going to be distributed between the three, media companies? Because if you're Disney, you are walking into that partnership with more rights to more content than the other two. So does that mean you get a bigger piece of the pie, or has it become an equal share, a third, a third, a third? So I think, the pricing and the business model will be the biggest challenge for those three going forward in terms of delivering that product. I think Fox is probably the one who's going to benefit the most because they don't have a streaming product like Disney has with ESPN Plus and Warner Brothers has with Max or some of their other products. So they I think are going to experience a benefit potentially more than the other two. But again, what does that mean in terms of how much money they can make versus the other two? So I think that those are the things that are going to be a challenge. And from what I've heard, they want to launch this fall. So that's not far. It'll be interesting to see how things develop on that.
Well, and one of the cool things about conglomeration is you can share costs, right? So you'll see things like hopefully infrastructure improvements, things like them being able to roll out more
Cloud.
real-time streaming
Yep.
services, things like that. One of the places where you really sort of find the dramatic gap is a lot of the regional sports networks and some of the folks, even like, obviously Apple is one of the biggest companies in the world, but they have exclusive rights for things like the MLS, and they might not be able to put the exact same amount of resources behind a streaming product that somebody else might. What would you say, especially from an upgrade and delivery standpoint, what are some of the challenges that you see with maybe these regional sports networks and even kind of privatized rights broadcasters?
Well, I don't know how much time we have, Ben, but
The
the
RSN discussion is a can of worms, and you don't have to chase that if you don't want to.
no, no, no. I'm always happy to. I mean, the RSN business is a bit of a quagmire right now, and I think that some good news for the Sinclair folks and the Diamond folks is that they seem to be resolving some of this. There will be a couple of baseball teams that will be able to have their games broadcast, and I don't know about stream, but certainly this season, I know the Guardians and the Twins, and I think it's the Rangers are the three that have come to agreements with Diamond Sports Group. But yes, it's a very interesting and frankly to me very fascinating issue because Major League Baseball is involved and the NBA is involved and the NHL is involved because obviously they have a vested interest in getting their games to seen by as many people as possible. So they've all jumped in and said, well, if Bally's or the RSNs fall apart, we'll broadcast the games and we'll produce the games. But that, to your point, isn't as easy said as easy done as said. So I don't know. I mean, I think that this coming season it's going to be a little bit fragmented. I think there's going to be a couple of different players that are streaming different parts of each of the leagues, those three leagues. And then during the course of the year, it will be interesting to see what happens in 25 because, for instance, the NBA has all of their media rights up after next season. So will they take all of the local rights to the 15 or 16 teams that the RSNs have rights to and take them back and package that in, with the national deal. So it would be sort of a national and a local deal. I think all of those things are still very much TBD, but it will be fascinating to watch. We're talking to them and hoping to see if there's a role for us to play in helping them stream some of these games.
Well, look, you're right. It is the Rangers, and I am a victim, largely of a lot of the. I think quagmire was the way that you put it, of kind of just people posturing and not wanting to put things in certain places. Right? It's
Yeah.
terrible from a fan perspective, and it's hard to feel like your voice has been heard in that. But one of the things I want to talk about too, you mentioned it a minute ago, is kind of the immediacy and the real time nature of a lot of these broadcasts. So folks like you and myself as well grew up probably more on the OTA side of things, where I could put my bunny ears in, I could watch the Rangers, I could watch whoever I wanted. And look, there's an 8-9 second delay, but that was right. I've got to get my fiber line or my TV line, and it's got to go over the air and get me. And then now we're talking about, especially when we pivot to streaming, we're talking about 60, 70, 80, even 2 minutes of delay a lot of times.
Yep.
And that actually is terrible from a user experience standpoint. I'm so surprised that we haven't demanded as end users and even broadcasters that we fix that, because you look, we talked about sports betting last time you were on the show, and that being one of the challenges, but even just a fan experience standpoint, right? You talked about not only being able to mute notifications on your phone so you don't spoil the game, but what are some of the applications that you're seeing folks really lean into from a real-time streaming perspective in the world of sports?
Yes, exactly. You're right. I mean, it's 2 minutes is insane. So, it's hard to even imagine why anybody would put up with that. But, one of the things that we're starting to see more of is sort of a move away from the subscriber model and a move towards the advertising model. The amount of subscriptions that people have is starting to get a bit overwhelming. I mean, we just talked about another potential bundle that somebody could conceivably have to spend another $50 on if they don't have the games that they want to watch. They'll get this new ESPN, Fox, WBD bundle. So it's getting to the point where the dollars that are being spent by people on subscriptions is 150, 200 more per month. And I think that it's becoming cost prohibitive. So, having an advertising model is I think ultimately going to take over more so than the subscription model. Excuse me. I mean, Amazon Prime just released their ad tier. Netflix is doing extremely well with their ad tier. It seems as though in the last 6 months or so. Um, so I think that you have to have advertising in your streaming service. One of the things, if I may, just toot our horn a little bit, is we're the only company and the first company in the industry to release real-time server-side ad insertion. So not only can we deliver the streams in half a second or less, but now we can insert ads into those streams. So any broadcaster who was worried about monetizing their content doesn't anymore, because we can deliver all of those same features and tools that they have, with a 60-second stream only in half a second. So I think that's where things are moving towards.
Well, and you bring up a really nice point too about, the fan experience doesn't stop at just viewing a specific game, right? I can't even tell you how many of my friends who can afford $5 a month were griping about having to subscribe to Peacock for one game, right? It's inconvenient from a user standpoint, and then you start to stack inconveniences on whether it's, a lack of reliability or lack of buffering on a stream, or hey, maybe I'm on DraftKings, I'm trying to play real time in tracking my team, or look, for me to even watching the Super Bowl, the thing stopped and buffered for me 5 or 6 times, and I've got a gig up and down at my house, and it's so frustrating from a user to even try and watch sports, and we've almost, in a lot of ways, it's almost been a race to the bottom, right? I want to bring back OTA for a second and talk about, look, there's a reliability of satellite, there's a reliability of cable, there's a reliability of just the over-the-air antenna that you really don't have in a lot of places with the streaming world. And that is dramatically impacting the fan experience. And I think one of the conversations and one of the questions I want to ask you right now is, how do you balance the desire for reliability maybe with that real-time need, right? I think that if we're focusing on fan experience, there's got to be a little bit of a give and take. But you guys are doing fantastic work over there on the Phoenix side of things. Is there some give and take there, or is it something that people can roll out immediately?
No, that's the thing. You don't have to sacrifice reliability, and you don't have to sacrifice stream quality or latency or no, there is no need to have to sacrifice any of those things. That's a myth. And people say, well, if you're streaming on WebRTC or you can't scale. Well, that's also a myth, because we can scale. So it has nothing to do with the protocol or the technology. It's how you build on top of that and what you do to create that end product for the user. And you're right, the user experience suffers because people, aren't building the right product around the protocol that is being called for. So no, we are not of that mindset at all, that you have to wait or sacrifice or any of that. It just doesn't have to happen anymore. And people have to start complaining more than just us, right? I mean, it has to be, and look, this is what happens when you get to a sort of a tipping point of things. It takes a minute. It doesn't happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight with everything over the years. I mean, from black and white to color, it didn't happen overnight. So, I mean, the same thing is happening with streaming, and the technology exists for streaming to be better than any other format and platform to watch the game. You can watch it as though you're at the stadium, but enough people have to know about it and realize that it exists for it to spread.
Well, it doesn't even stop just at viewing the game, right? It's multi-screen experiences. It's real-time stats.
Absolutely.
It's you look, the internet goes out at the house, and I've got 3 or 4 people pulling it up on their phones, but Usher is halfway through one song here, hasn't started here, and is almost done here, right? How important is, you talk about real-time streaming. Are there applications really outside of the what I would call the shared screen experiences? Does it apply into the multi-screen side of things?
Oh, 100%. Yes, 100%. So we have a feature called multi-view that allows our clients to stream up to 5 different camera angles. That could be from one game where you can see, if you're watching a football game, it could be over the top, on the end zones, on the sidelines, and all 5 of those camera angles are in real time and they're in sync. You can watch 5 different games at the same time. Imagine if you're at a golf tournament, you could watch 5 different golf holes. So yes, that is that's become a very popular feature for our clients to incorporate into their platforms. One of the other things we're seeing a lot of is watch parties, being able to have you and 2 or 3 of your friends, they could be all over the world, but watching the same game at the same time and talking and commenting and, talking trash and all the fun things that you do if you were sitting in the same room, only you're sitting in different rooms. And I'm not talking about texting and chatting, I'm talking about video, and all 4 of you are watching that same game at the same time, on the screen. So those interactive features are really what kind of drives the user experience, and what frankly drives the real need for real time, because you can't do that if you're 10 or 20 seconds delayed, let alone 60.
Well, Jed, what's stopping people from doing it? I mean, if I'm a broadcaster, this seems like a no-brainer, right? Is it a rebuild of my infrastructure? Is it a price thing? I mean, what realistically is keeping folks from using this technology?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think change isn't the easiest thing for big companies. I think the fact that we didn't have a way for them to monetize, using ads in the past, was something that held them back, and rightly so, because if I'm Fox or NBC or Disney or ESPN, name your channel, real-time streaming is great, but if they can't monetize, there's no way for them to recoup money. But now we have that. So, we're hopeful that that's going to start to change the conversation. It's just time. It's just, we've got to get people convinced that it works, it's good, and it's reliable, and it will make a lot of their users, fans, happier.
Well, last question here, and this is always one of my favorite questions. I'm going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball here for a second. Imagine as soon as 5 years, as far as maybe 10 or 15 years away, what are some of the technologies and what are some of the preferences that you think will continue to come out of this increased demand for streaming, especially in the world of sports?
Well, I think two things I'll say that are more along the lines of betting. One is that we're going to see people being able to bet on their big screen, being able to kind of enter your credentials to a sports book, FanDuel, DraftKings, name your sports book, and have a sort of seamless experience where you're watching, which only for streaming, where you're streaming the game and you're able to bet while you're watching the game. So it's a bet and watch experience on any device, big screen, little screen, you name it. And then I think that, there'll be kind of a fun thing from a betting standpoint where you can bet against your friends, sort of a peer-to-peer bet, where, I can say to you, hey, Ben, I think Pat Mahomes is going to throw a touchdown on the next play. And you say, no way, I'll bet you $2. And, we can kind of some back and forth on that. But again, the experience has to get better or I should say get broader, and more people have to incorporate that sort of real-time technology. But I think I see it happening. It's just a matter of time.
Well, look, Jed, you'll be with us every step of the way, being our trusted advisor in real-time broadcast. I'll tell you what, if you guys get a chance, if you're out at NABs, IBCs, wherever Jed is or Phenix is these days,
Yeah,
get
up and
out there,
down.
ask them questions. I mean, that's the best way that I've been able to learn. Just, I come from the world of broadcast. I come from the world of O&Os, and the world of streaming is still relatively in its infancy. That sounds crazy to
Totally.
say, but you talked about even building on top of applications and building on top of streams. There's so many places that we can continue to go as an industry. And Jed, I know that you're a trusted advisor, not only for me, but for a lot of people as well. If people have questions, where can they reach out to you?
Uh, Come to our site, Phenix RTS. That's PHENIXRTS.com.
Well, look, Jed, we appreciate you having you on the show today. And look, we're going to find a way to have you back on. We always do. And we appreciate you, the viewer, tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe. Check us out next time on Pro AV Today.